Well, welcome everyone. This is Daryl Coach D. Andrews, and I'm excited to host my second McGraw-Hill Ed Exchange webinar, Educator Motivation, Raising the Bar of Expectations. I'm honored and privileged to have a distinguished guest, a panelist here who are educators in their own right and have quite a bit of wisdom when it comes to education motivation. And we really look forward to sharing with you a webinar that would be a benefit to you throughout your school year. Just by way of introduction, just want to start off, and again, thanks McGraw-Hill for hosting, and Ed Exchange for hosting this webinar. And please keep in mind that this is just one of a series of webinars that McGraw-Hill will be hosting throughout the year. So stay informed, stay in tune, and we'll be sharing some really good information throughout the year. Just as a general introduction, as mentioned, my name is Daryl Andrews. They call me Coach D. I'm an education consultant, speaker, trainer, author. I've been working with schools and school districts for about 2 decades. I've personally been in over 1,750 schools as a speaker, trainer, consultant, and providing a variety of different types of programs ranging from professional development to student motivation programs, as well as parental involvement initiatives within school districts. One of the highlights of my career is establishing an initiative for youth by the name of HYPE, which is an acronym for Helping Youth Pursue Excellence, which is one of the top-rated youth programs under the Workforce Investment Act, and we're quite proud of the fact that we had one of the highest dropout prevention rates of all the programs that were contracted throughout the United States. And our program was in direct partnership with schools in the Pennsylvania and Delaware areas. So we're very excited about that. And again, I'm the moderator, to introduce you to some of the panelists that are on board here. First panelist is Dr. Joseph Galino, and you can see his bio there. And quite a bit of information on here. I don't want to go through all of the details, but you can see that he's done quite a bit over the years. And I like the fact that one of his publications is, here is the Middle School Programmatic Practices and Student Satisfaction with School, which for all of us, I'm sure, on board here, that's something that is definitely of interest as far as how do we get students to excel and be satisfied with their academic experience. And as you also can see, he's presented at quite a few different conferences throughout the United States. So thank you, Dr. Galino. Could you just tell folks if you want to share a few words with the audience before we get started, just say hello and maybe say a few words about yourself and your work?
Well, first of all, I thank you for the opportunity. And this is my work. I love children, and it's always been about kids at all age levels, from preschool to college kids. As far as I'm concerned, they're all students, and they all need the same thing. They need love, they need mentors.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. Thank you, sir. We're honored to have you on board with our webinar. And our second panelist is someone I've had quite a few conversations with, is my new friend, Patricia LeCount. And I'm probably messing her last name up, but I'll just say right off the bat here, one thing I enjoyed in my conversation with her is just her energy level and genuine interest in her students. As you can see, she's a classroom instructor of marketing education, as well as hotel, resort, and tourism management at Monroe Career and Technical Institute in Pennsylvania.
I'm delighted to be part of this. This is my first opportunity to do a webinar as a panelist. And I tell my students they need to take chances, and so that's what I like to do. Try something new every once in a while. I think it's a good thing for us to practice ourselves what we preach. I teach at a career and technical school in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania, and I'm back in high schools now for about 10 years at a career and technical school that, just to give you a perspective, we have just about 48% free and reduced lunch, about over 40% of our kids have IEPs. We have a lot of commuter parents that still work in New York, so we have a handful. But we have a lot of great So I'm real proud of that, and I'm proud to be a part of this today. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for helping me out during this slight technical difficulty. you definitely helped me out with that one. All right. And do we have Sam on? Did Sam get on yet? But no, he's not yet. But anyway, we have our third panelist. Unfortunately, I don't think he's on board with us right now. It's Samuel Reed, and maybe he'll come on a little bit later. All right. Just to start off, I like this one quote by William James. He's a Harvard professor, and many considered him to be the father of modern psychology. For a number of years, he had conducted quite a bit of research on human potential, and a lot of focus in on how individuals progress in school and life based upon, their potential. So he did a lot of research, and after many years of research, he kind of came to the conclusion that he would summarize his research up in one statement. And the statement that he came up with was this, and that is: the greatest discovery of my generation is that a person can change their life by changing their attitudes of mind. And one thing I've learned in my close to 2 decades in working with schools and school districts throughout the country and going in and doing everything from school climate assessments to consulting around motivating students of color and closing the achievement gap is that attitude plays a very big role in the way we operate on a day-to-day basis. It drives our decisions. It impacts the way that we see our students, and so I want to start with this quote because one thing during this presentation we're going to focus a lot in on is the attitudes of the students, our own personal attitudes, and how we can adjust our attitudes, or many times I like to say alter our attitudes around our work so that every day we can find joy and pleasure in the education experience. And a lot of times when I'm working with schools and school districts, that's a big part of what I'm trying to do, is get folks on board with the expectations. I have this quote that I use a lot, and that is: nobody rises to low expectations. So, to raise the bar of expectations so that there is a belief and a desire every day towards academic excellence for the students as well as for the educators that work with students on a day-to-day basis. So with that in mind, our objectives today are to discuss strategies for educator motivation and inspiration throughout the school year. What are some things that we could possibly do on a day-to-day basis that will be not just inspirational to our kids, because it's important for those who work with the kids and those who are engaged with the kids to be motivated as well. That's why we titled our workshop this webinar as we did. Discuss these strategies and what are some things that we can do daily to be able to inspire our students as well as ourselves. To discuss out-of-the-box tools for student engagement. I've again been privileged to see some people do some really neat things, even in at-risk schools and schools where you have a high population of free and reduced lunch students, and really engage those students in the learning process. And I've seen some schools who really struggled with that. I've seen some educators who have found ways, despite the challenges, to make the connection, and some who have great challenges with it. So we want to take a look at that and see how we can help make connections, despite some of the challenges that may be out there. And then to discuss the importance of parent and community engagement in school success. I've been doing a series of trainings at school districts throughout the country this past month in district convocations, and one thing I talked a lot about when it comes to parents is that parents are the X factor in academic success. And what you typically find is when you have a household that is on board with academic progress and they're able to communicate the significance of school to their kids on a daily basis, as well, not just in words but in expectations, then typically that's when you find a young person has a great desire to do well academically. So that's kind of our objective today, and we're going to be doing it in a conversational manner. One thing I want to mention to everyone up front is we're going to kind of go through these questions and have this panel discussion, and then we're going to answer, probably leave about 20 minutes or so at the end. So any questions that you ask, we will attempt to answer as many of those as we can. I apologize, I don't know why that happened, at the end of the webinar. So again, about 15 to 20 minutes to answer the questions. So please answer questions as we go along, ask questions as we go along. We'll do our best to get to them at the as many as we can at the end. All right. Educator motivation. When I say educator motivation, what am I saying here? One, I like to use the word motive when I kind of talk about the word motivation, because really motivation itself is intrinsic. And that intrinsic motivation is directly connected to a motive. In other words, an internal state that's driven by a goal. And I find that, a lot of times in education, I've been a chance to interact on college campuses, teaching schools, and the question I'll ask the educators during their learning experience in becoming teachers is, what's your motive? What motivates you internally to do what you do? And so once that's identified, that motive in conjunction with action causes motivation. In other words, as number 2 says, an established mission fuels your actions and activities on a day-to-day basis. So that motive, in essence, almost pretty much becomes a sort of a mission, and that mission within itself fuels us on a day-to-day basis. In other words, we're kind of looking at the big picture of why we're doing what we do in education instead of looking at the momentary situation, which sometimes, in some cases, especially if you have challenging situations with your kids, can be somewhat discouraging. Or if there's challenges with the school and things are going on and there's a lot of expectations, that could be challenging. So the motive is important. And then another part about educator motivation is the synergy with optimistic colleagues is fuel for the teacher's soul. One thing I try to share with a lot of educators is that you need to build a dream team. 4 or 5 people who have the same passion that you have for you, and let those individuals be sort of your driving force, because sometimes we have tendencies with other individuals who are somewhat pessimistic. They can dominate an environment and impact the culture so much or climate so much that it proliferates the entire organization. And I don't think that should be the case. It really, in any setting where you're working with kids, there definitely needs to be an environment of optimism. And so in some cases, if it's not there in my core circle of people, then maybe I need to look at creating it. So synergy is important, and that synergy becomes contagious, and that within itself becomes motivational. So just wanted to point that out as well. A couple of things as far as research, and then we'll get into the discussion, panel discussion. The Program for International Assessment did some research on, the rankings, on a global perspective as far as certain categories. And as far as the United States, out of 34 countries, the United States ranked 14th in reading, 17th in science, and 25th in math. So, there's a lot of research out there, and everyone has different numbers. But looking at this, you can see that motivation is important, because we got to, when we look at these numbers and we say, why are so many of our young people not making a connection? We gotta put motivation in the middle of that and say we got to find a way to inspire young people to understand that we're now living in a global society with global competition, and we have to really seriously think about our education and its significance to our life outcomes. And so, with the United States at one time being tops with everything here, all these different categories, the question becomes, why are we having these challenges? And then, on the flip side of that, you see there's, according to some research here, there's 12,423,000 kids living in abject poverty alone. So, I think a lot of times that directly ties into, academics. If I'm not excelling academically, that's going to significantly increase my chances of poverty. So, those of us, our stakeholders who have a chance to interact with kids on a regular basis, we certainly can motivate them and hopefully increase those numbers, which increases our country's success as well as student success. So with that in mind, we just want to kind of go into a few points. And what I believe, number one, is education is the fishing pole, but an educator that cares, then what happens is that young person wants to excel to satisfy that educator, which ultimately benefits them in their life. Number two, a student with a dream is a student with a future. However, a student with a dream is fueled by caring adults who believe in their dreams. No one on this planet has achieved a dream, achieved it on their own. There's typically someone, a caring educator, a family member, someone that cares about them enough to where they inspire that young person to achieve their goals and dreams in life. And lastly here, effective collaboration and leadership are the primary keys to student progress. Again, I've been in, over 1,700 schools, and I found that collaboration, the effective leadership, and leadership across the board, not just, from administrators, but even, the classroom teachers and school counselors and all the stakeholders within the school, because everyone in their own right are leaders within schools, you find that student progress happens because there's people taking personal responsibility for their core area, and that personal responsibility as a leader produces very positive outcomes in most cases within schools. So these are three things I stand by in my work, and I find that you know, in school after school, that you see these things in place, you'll see success. And so, moving on to some of the questions. And panelists, just kind of take your time, and as you feel led to it, I'll kind of ask each one of you as we go through these questions your thoughts. But just from your professional experience, give us some insight as far as your thoughts on these questions and how people who are listening on this webinar could take this information and go back and maybe be able to use it in their successful teaching careers here. Panelists, please take a few moments from your perspective and discuss the importance of educator motivation to the achievement of academic goals. And Patricia, I'll start with you. What is that, when you hear that statement, what does that mean to you? And when you tie it into academics, from your perspective, is that an important, significant factor?
Absolutely. The statement actually reminded me of something that a professor made mention of when I was taking my principal leadership, and I agree with the fact that we need to be cognizant of the fact that any one of these kids that are in our classroom might move in next door to us one day. And so it's part of our role, I think, to make them good citizens, someone we'd be proud to live next door to, and someone that can go on and be a part of society in a fully functional way, regardless of what their ability level is. And so I take that very seriously, because I think we have to do much more than what the textbooks teach. We have to set an example, motivate them, and keep the bar very high for them in ways that are achievable based on their individual abilities. But the motivation for me is intrinsic. And I think that I need to take time each summer and get recharged. And I do that. I was after we spoke the other day, I took a look back over the last 6 or 7 years and realized, maybe not by design, but just so happened that every single year I went back and learned more about my curriculum and got connected to what it is that I'm teaching and how it is that I'm teaching it. And I also seem to take some time in the like teacher in the workplace kind of experience, where I'm able to bring to the classroom examples of why what we're learning matters. Whether it's math, reading, literacy, what is it that the boss really is looking for and how it might really matter to them as they go through their lives.
It's really interesting, when you said why, and I want to touch on that for just a moment. One thing I talk about quite a bit, I have this little formula that I came up with, and that is academic dream relevance equates to academic relevance, which ultimately leads to placing a why in the education experience. So when that young person, they see the significance of dreams that they have for their lives, and they connect it to, why I'm in that classroom, then that puts the why in education. Why am I here? What am I learning this for? What's the importance of math to my future goals? And I think that's excellent that you have decided to bring that to their attention, bring it to their attention and highlight that. So thank you for that input. Much appreciated. Dr. Galino, what can you add to that? I mean, from your experiences, obviously you worked in a variety of different capacities as a school leader and some instruction on your own right. What are your thoughts on the motivation and its relationship to achievement of academic goals?
Whenever we talk about teacher excellence and the importance, I always go straight to the great Richard Lavoie, who was the presenter of, to me, the finest workshop that I ever observed, called How Difficult Can It Be? The Fat City Workshop, where he taught educators how to work with students with special needs. And the quote in all that workshop that strikes me always and continues to strike me, and I give the video to each one of my new teachers, is the child needs a teacher, the one with special needs. They don't need the aid. They don't need the helper. They're the ones that need the teachers. And so to take that further for me, all children need teachers. All children need good teachers. And better yet, all children need great teachers.
Yes.
The educator motivation, to me, is the most important thing, and the educator is the most important. All in the building. Everybody's got to be passionate. Even if you can hire janitors that are passionate about education, that transfers students.
Yeah.
Must be student-centered, not math or content-centered. Kids will come first. If we love them, we take care of them, they will learn. We must take pride in achieving our main goal, which should be student learning and the student's desire to learn. Going back to my early days, I was considered a Pied Piper, and I would do all the wildest things in the world to gain their attention and then take them where they wanted to go. But my bottom line statement was, I wanted you to be so smart that when I'm 65, 70 years old, and you're the voters, you're going to make the right decisions to take care of me.
Wow.
That's kind of how I.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic, and there's quite a bit that you said in there. And one thing I got out of what you're saying, and I look at that statement you said by Richard Lavoie. It kind of goes back to a philosophy that I have, and that is, kids are not committed to programs. Kids are committed to people. And it's the individuals that they interact with every day that gives them the motivation, even if they're coming from an at-risk situation, where all around them is education apathy, where people aren't really trying academically and they're not communicating the importance of academics. That child can walk into that school building. There's somebody there that can encourage them. Real quick, Dr. Galino, I remember when I was in high school, there was a school maintenance worker, and for some reason he just felt compelled every time he would see me to motivate me. Chances are he probably did it with all the kids. I don't know, but I took it personal. I didn't see him doing it with other kids, but every time he would see me, he would say, hey, I believe you're going to do something significant with your life. And, man, I see you going to class. You must be going in and learn something so you can be a great help to people. I mean, I heard that all the time from this guy. To this day, I couldn't tell you his name. Yeah. But that was the school maintenance worker. And all these years later, I remember him. There's a lot of people I don't remember, but I remember him.
Correct.
And, so that's a good point, and that impacts school climate as well. When you have that body of people who are just saying, hey, whatever it takes, we're going to make this an environment of learning for our students, and they're going to enjoy this experience being here.
Right.
Very good.
Coach, if I may add something, I asked my students if they could tell the teachers what they think is important. One young lady said to me, please encourage me and look me in the eye, because no one in my house talks to me all week, and the only chance I'm going to have to talk to an adult is here. And when you don't look me in the eye, I don't think you know I'm here.
Wow. That's really something. Quite honest, that sounds like a book title. Please encourage me. Please encourage me. So, I mean, that really sounds like a book title, because that can almost be a mantra for probably a good 30-40% of the kids that walk in the school buildings every day.
Oh, yeah.
That just please encourage me. Even when I'm in my worst state, don't look at me like this. Because see me beyond what you see with your eyes, and that's a process that people that raise the bar of expectations think about, on a regular basis. Question number two, is well documented that today's teachers have more to do with less time and resources. And boy, do we hear this one a lot. People are kind of rumbling quite a bit about this one. Based upon your experiences, how does a teacher effectively manage classroom priorities with this reality and consideration? In other words, less time and less resources. We'll start with this time with you, Dr. Galino. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is a little tougher for me, but like the rest of life, so much is going on that people can experience or they're able to engage with now compared to the past. I think, number one, we need to slow down and prioritize. Otherwise, we feel overwhelmed. So that's the first. I think we need to take time for ourselves and really focus rather than get caught up in everything else. Establish our goals, whether they're district goals or building expectation or national achievement tests, and just focus on those few goals rather than try to do too much.
Right.
We may have less time and we may have less dollars physically in hand, but I think with the antithesis, we have far more resources online as teachers and through collaboration, sharing with peers, which was not a reality in the past. In the past, it was my classroom, my children. It wasn't our school. It wasn't our children. It was a more my, and you kind of were separated from your peers. At least that's what I experienced.
Gotcha.
Today, you can obtain all kinds of ideas and resources from all over the world by pressing a button. And personally, I would love to be a teacher today with all the resources that we have, all the free stuff.
Yes, and there's a lot out there. There's a lot out there now. There's quite a bit out there these days. And you know, it's interesting thinking about what you're saying. I just want to ask you: do you have any insight or experience? Maybe not experience, but understanding of the whole thing of professional learning communities, PLCs out there? Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think that's when you talk about prioritizing. I mean, it's good to be able to get with your colleagues, I think, and you know, share best practices right there in your school building.
I had that saved up for a further down the line question, but yes, that's the most important thing, is learning from your peers. I know at my school, anytime anybody goes out to a workshop, and they can go to anywhere they want to, but one of the rules is when you come back, you're making a presentation to the rest of the faculty, and then others latch on to that material. And it might not be for everybody on faculty, but somebody will latch on, and then that develops the teams. And we learn more from me bringing in ideas and saying, okay, everybody, we're all doing this. We learn more from somebody coming with the idea, and then one teacher at a time, two teachers at a time, and then they become the leaders of the teams, and then they end up teaching the whole faculty.
Very good. That's a good practice to establish in your building. All right, Miss Patricia, what are your thoughts on this question? I'm sure you probably deal with this yourself within your classroom.
I do, and I'd have to say I probably fail miserably on the time management piece because I'm the last teacher to leave the building every day. So that's not setting a great example, but it's probably because my priorities, when I'm in the classroom with the kids, I'm with them. I'm zoned in with what they're doing. And moving around the room, sitting with them in small groups, trying to encourage each group to get going with whatever it is that we were working on that day. And so I don't do the paperwork then. I don't do any of the administrative pieces. And that's just how I choose to manage my classroom. I do that, the rest of it on my own time. That's part of my job. I consider that part of my professional commitment. But there are a lot of resources out there, and certainly at a career and technical school, maybe it's more natural for us, but I think this is natural for any school. You need to connect with your community. Regardless of what you teach, there are businesses there that you should be connecting with. They'd be happy to help you in so many ways. Just depends on what you need, what kind of resources you need. You just have to ask. Those resources are there. Collaborating with our peers, that's another huge resource, and the internet. You sign up for RSS feeds in whatever it is that you teach. Sign up for the blog sites, and just spend a few minutes every day scanning and see what others are doing. And I pick up something every single day. That's how we got connected today, isn't it? Yeah,
that's exactly how we got connected. Isn't that amazing? What a great way. That's great. I mean, you pointed out, and you know, and that's just being a part of that community, you know, where we're sharing ideas and sharing best practices, and then sometimes you make connections, you know, and I'm sorry?
There's so much out there that you almost make yourself re-bombarded again. There's just so much information. Be careful of that.
You can definitely be careful, you know, but I think if you streamline it and tie it into those things that can be effective, that it can help on that resources side where I may lack in resources within my building or within my, maybe outside of it, there's some things I can grab onto that could be of help, you know, and on the achievement of what we're looking to achieve. So thank you both very much for that one. Now this one right here, this is an area that's near and dear to me because I deal with this one quite a bit. There's been a plethora of research out there on the challenges dealing with the millennial youth, and that's more or less the youth of this generation. That when you talk about the different generations, of course, you got Gen X, Gen Y, millennials, etc. Compare and contrast generations' path with this generation, and what you believe are keys to engaging millennials in the classroom. Now, let me start with this one, and then we'll kind of go in and see what your thoughts are. But I think the thing that we were talking about in the last question is directly connected to what we're talking about in this question. One of the great challenges, I think, with this generation in comparison to past is, Dr. Galino, is they have access to so much, so much on the internet, so much from a video game perspective. So, all these different things, all these different activities, to be able to, grab their attention and keep their attention is probably more of a greater challenge now than it has been in the past. I know when I was going to school, there were 3 television stations, ABC, NBC, and CBS, and give my age away, but that's what we had, and our activities consisted of going outside and building go-karts and riding on snowboards. I'm from Syracuse, New York, and we would ride on the snowboards a lot during the winter time. But nowadays, a kid can do a million different things in their home within an hour. So the millennials pose a different kind of a challenge than generations past. What would you say, Patricia, as far as your thoughts on, even though there's a lot going on with this generation and a lot to kind of get them embraced in education, but what are some things you think could be used to be able to help make this young generation click in the classroom?
It took me a long time to get around to the obvious. They are used to multitasking, and I find that they need music. That's how they work.
Right.
And so now I've been playing with the music in my classroom a little bit, and I've decided I'm not ever going to let them make the choice on the music. I'm going to make the choice that it's going to reflect their behaviors. So when their behaviors are better, we put on John Mayer. When we needed, and I need a little motivation today, we had our Otis Redding. We came in the first day of school, it was the spa music.
Right.
It sets the tone, but with the music going, I think they're more productive.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm controlling the mood. The mood is absolutely in my hand. And then I'm teaching them a little music at the same time.
Well, that's definitely that.
Yeah, another thing, I don't mind, in my classroom this works, and this would not work for everybody, but I don't think they absolutely have to be sitting in their seat solidly to be listening to me. I don't mind if they move a little, move around, if they need to get a glass of water or do whatever. We would do that in an office, and maybe it's okay, as long as they learn the basic rules about what's the right way to go about it, because they're used to doing that. It helps them learn, I'll let them do it.
Okay. Dr. Galino, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously this is an area that a lot of folks are looking at nowadays, so any input you can provide would be greatly appreciated.
I think we need to continue striving to move from being sages on the stage and move to more guides on the side. Rather than giving them information and expecting them to spit at that's the old days. Another problem that we deal with is that the past generations were exposed far less to all the negatives of the world, as you stated. I'm in that same world. I played around in the park in San Francisco, and I could go across San Francisco for an hour and a half on buses at 10 years old, and no one ever knew about it. We were treated as children longer, and we were protected a little bit more, but not from freedom of movement, just protected from the outside world. This generation, they're exposed to things far beyond their years. Just look at television. They're treated as their friends, so many of them. The media bombardment and their use of media, often without proper supervision, those are the negatives and the difficulties that we deal with. So for me, the key to engaging them is, in the early years, focus on the basic skills of, say, up to grade preschool to grade 3 or 4, and then begin checking the media tools that they're used to and engage them directly to take charge of their own learning, and then finish off moving flipped classrooms, starting from junior high to high school, where the teachers are facilitators, not staters of knowledge, no memorization, all projects and controlled by those means. I think that's the direction that the really successful schools are going right now.
You know, it's interesting that you say that because I'm a big fan. I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy, but he's out of India. His name is Dr. Sugatra Mitra. And Dr. Mitra talks about this process, and, you know, without going into details, pretty a lot of research, but it's kind of like it's almost like a project management type learning process, you know, where you have these kids who are given assignments and they're figuring out quite a bit. But to make a long story short, he's a big fan of the fact that students are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. You know, and that sometimes when you put them in teams and you allow them to work together, in particular from a technology-based perspective, that a lot of times you'll be surprised at the number of, you know, the way that they can answer questions and the way they can learn in that capacity. You know, if anyone out there want to take a look at this, he did a talk for TED, Technology Education Group, and it's on this. His name is Dr. Sugatra Mitra. But I'm a big fan of what he talks about because it is about the students getting together and using their intellectual capabilities to you know, learn and grow academically. I'm going to take a different. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
When you do that, the non-school kids, the ones that aren't into passing tests, etc., they start coming out of the woodwork. They start showing the skills they have. And those are the people that might not do well in school grade-wise, but when they graduate, they get better jobs than we do because they can do things, or they make more money because they can do things that the people that were really good in school can't do.
Yeah. Absolutely. In this generation, you're doing them a favor because all the corporations out here are looking for innovative learners, critical thinkers, and you know, innovators and critical thinkers, and that's one way to help them become critical thinkers. I'm going to go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. This is Patty. I do about 90% of that kind of project management, and I love it, and I find a great deal of success with it. But I just two things. You need to be able to balance because kids are going in different directions. And the other piece that I often find is the kids get into areas that, you know, I don't know the answer to your question. And I have to be able to say that honestly. Because when they get collaboratively working and they're looking at things on the Internet that are related to what we're learning, I don't know all the answers, and I need to be really honest with them. And they're surprised when you tell them, I don't know, let's find the answer together. They need to hear that.
Yep. Yeah, there you go. And that empowers them when you do that. It empowers them in a major way. I want to take a different direction with this because I said I want to wait to the end, and we're kind of pushing up time-wise. I want to take some of these questions that were being asked and just kind of put them out there for you. And we'll go back in and see if we want to finish all these questions or maybe go to a couple more that we have listed here. But one of the registrants said that, asked a question. I'll just put it out there, and either one of you can answer you feel led to. But how do we avoid feeling overwhelmed by the great need of so many students? Good question. Anyone, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I may be one of those that feels overwhelmed by the great need of so many students because I truly believe that we cannot teach a child unless we consider the whole child. And I keep Maslow's hierarchy of needs in my classroom to remind myself that, you know, some of these kids are coming in without having eaten, without having a bed to sleep in. They slept in the car last night. There's all kinds of other issues. So I do take it very, very, very seriously. But I think that even if there are those great needs, when you establish patterns in your classroom, routines that are predictable, then the kids start to come in and they feel safe there, and the discussion of those needs maybe doesn't have to be spoken words every day. I mean, I require all my kids to listen to how full is your bucket. We listen to that together. And so as soon as there's something in the classroom going on that one kid doesn't like, another one's saying something, they'll stop each other. No bucket giving. You know, we don't try to overwhelm each other with, there's no negatives, there's no put downs. You know, when kids use the F word in my classroom, it means fat, and we don't do that. We don't say fat, we don't say stupid, none of it. And I'm talking kids from the city, and they know the rules. They know the rules. It's what I respect, and they do it, and they come in there with all these great needs, but they feel like they don't have to talk about them for a couple of hours because they're in a safe place, that they can take chances and they can try to learn, and no one's going to put them down.
That's great. So you built a classroom environment around standards, around expectations, and been able to get the kids to understand, that this is what we represent here, and that's the way it should be done. I tell people all the time. I said, particular educators, that we can establish environments within our classroom that are environments of optimism. We have to work at it. It's not like the kids are automatically going to walk in and just, jump on board with us. But if we stay with them and we work with them, we're consistent, we can get them there. We can certainly get them there. Dr. Galeno, your thoughts on that?
Very well stated, Patty. I agree totally. The thing that I would add and I would hope that in your building there are the resources, the people to go talk to about specific individual needs of different students, so that you don't have to figure it out all by yourself. So that you have that help and that guidance and that expertise, rather than having to guess, because when we guess, that's painful with not guessing right. But if we're told the proper practices, then we can use the proper practices, and then we don't, if it happens to fail or it's not working like we'd like it to, at least we know we've given it the best shot and we've given it the right shot.
Absolutely. And that goes back to that community piece and the support of that community. Yeah.
It reminded me of an incident just in the last couple of days. It's National Suicide Prevention Week, and a young person in our building sees that as National Suicide Day. Big difference. Big difference. So these needs are presented to us every day.
Yeah. And and that's a good point, because sometimes kids take things differently, and then we see it one way and they see it a totally different way. And it's good to make sure that they, you kind of answered there's another question here. What concrete activities do you do to promote and motivate a student? I would like to answer that one myself. One thing I believe is that, and I use the statement, a student with a dream is a student with a future. One thing that I found has been consistent for years as far as motivating young people is helping them really identify some of their personal affinities, those gifts, talents, and abilities, and connecting that to their education experience. I do this thing called passion mapping, where we sit down with kids and we help them take affinities. Sometimes they struggle with it, and they can't really, they're like, well, what do you mean? I don't think I'm gifted at anything. We help them identify some things. And then we walk them through a strategic process where they map out ideas and concepts. And I'm telling you, we do it in a teaming format. And it's what's interesting. I've been in schools where you have gang proliferation and all types of stuff, and you find these kids sitting down and just having the greatest time talking about these ideas, and it's all connected to education. And it brings relevance to math, and brings relevance to science, and it brings relevance to any class. But what the thing that seems to motivate the kids is something that they're interested in, And I want to ask you put this out to you as how important is student interest to learning, from your perspective?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
You've got to connect it to the world the way they understand it, the way they see it, and we have to make it relevant. When you're giving examples, to me it had to be the iPhone 5. You've got to let them know that you know what their world is about, and that what you're teaching relates to their world.
Very good. Very good.
For me, it always was, and it still is, the hooks.
Yeah.
What am I going to do to get them interested in what we're going to be talking about today? What angle am I going to take? What comment off a sitcom? Whatever am I going to do? What am I going to come in dressed like one morning to get their attention, just to move on to the spot?
Gotcha. There's that connections piece again. It's really something. Another question that we got here is, I always fear I'm invading their privacy. Am I naive to believe that they really want me to know them that personally? That's another good question. Anyone want to take that one and provide some insight?
Oh. From my experiences, I end up getting to know my kids really quite well, but I go so slowly. So slowly. I'll ask an open-ended question and they even say, and if you don't want to answer that today or ever, that's okay, but know that I'm here. And it takes some of them quite some time, but they really do want someone to listen to them. And they do want someone to know them very well. And they're going to warm up, some faster than others, but they do need us to listen.
I agree. You know, I've heard of someone once say, you know, treat that child like it's your own child. You know, what would you do to make that connection with your own child? Now, in some cases, that's difficult because your own child, you're with them every day, and you're the parent and all. But I understand the heart behind that statement. You know, a parent that cares would do whatever it takes to help that child make the connection. You know, and sometimes kids will act like they don't want you to do certain things, but in their hearts they really do want you. They want you to pay attention. They want you to inquire and ask, you know, about them and their lives and what's going on. So, and then I think if they'll let you know if you're getting too deep with them, especially this generation.
Yeah.
They have no problem telling you.
I think you show that you're open, not one-on-one show, but you just show by your personality and your daily behaviors that you're open, and as an educator, you really are looking all the time for the, not weaknesses, but for the areas that you can help. And you can tell by body language, you can tell by the glint in the eye, you can tell by a certain facial expression when and if it's time for you to take that next step to reach out.
Absolutely.
They'll tell you.
They give you the cues. They give you the cues. But the thing is, in a nutshell, that we have to. That's a big part of the education experience. You know, even those ones that are sometimes the ones that are somewhat apprehensive and kind of holding back is the ones that really want the attention the most. You know, because something may be going on in their lives where they don't seem like they have anybody or they don't trust anybody. You know, what's amazing to me, I speak at schools all over the country, and sometimes I'll meet kids and they feel like they'll say things like, "I don't feel like I have anybody in the world that cares about me." Then I look around you and I say, wow, you got hundreds of people around you. How could you say that? So it goes to show you sometimes kids will feel comfortable telling someone that maybe they're not even familiar with something, and in their own circle they won't say anything to anybody. And that shouldn't be the case. That really shouldn't be the case. We're going to get ready to wrap this up. We're coming down the home stretch. I just wonder if you all can give me just a quick thought on this last question I'm going to cover, and that is, I often say that parental involvement is the X factor in student success. I will add to that community involvement. Let's not look at the challenge part, but what are some things you've seen? And again, real quick, because we're down to just a few minutes, what are some things to help improve parental and or community involvement? We'll start with you, Dr. Galino.
For me, and I hear this all the time about the people at the entry of the school, but the people at the entry points, whatever they are of the school, need to be warm and welcoming and make people feel happy when they greet them.
Yes.
And then the next step, the whole staff really needs to be that same way, warm and welcoming to everybody. But those front two, or whoever they are, need to be the best at it. And then communication is a strong key, communicating in all ways to all members of the school community and the local community, whether you use email, whether you use voicemails, whether you use media, whatever you use, but continually communicate the good things that are going on, and at the same time communicating positives and inviting people to join in with that. And then I found it to be really successful to build, if you can, a strong home and school based on the movers and takers and parents, and then turn them loose.
Yep.
Turn them to get more people involved. That would be my 4 keys.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. LeCompte, your thoughts on this?
It reminded me of I had the first parent conference of our faculty, I guess, this school year. I had a young man last year with me that did not do very well and had a little bit of an attitude, I would say, came back to school the very first day of school, and 2 hours later I had a parent conference. And the reason was, when I finally got Dad here, it was I wanted to tell him his son was marvelous. I had seen a change, and I wanted so much for that child to take that to the next level, needed Dad's help, And Dad's like, I've never had a conference like this. I've never had somebody call and tell me my kid was great.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
so all of a sudden Dad was there. And I've had other parents, if you call them in the first week of school, if you can, because they haven't done a lot wrong yet. And you want to be able to call and say, wow, you've got one really great kid. How can we work together to make this happen? And then later when you have to suspend them, it's a little easier.
Right. You know, that is a golden best practice right there, because that shocks a parent. You're calling me to tell me my child is great. That's a first. And I remember this real quick. This one teacher I met in Montana, she took it to the next level, and I've never heard anything like this before. She actually invited the parents over to her home before the school year started for dinner. She would, and just sit down with them and get to know them. And she said that eliminated any acrimony down the line. They trusted me to the maximum, because that relationship, just like we talk about connectedness with the kids, you got the connectedness with the parent. And now that parent, instead of showing up at the door grumbling, complaining as soon as something goes wrong, that parent becomes an advocate. They become an ally, someone that's on your side, that supports your quest. So, but as it's kind of like when you go to Disney World. You come in, you're smiling, and when it's time to go, you're kind of sad. So, but unfortunately, we're at the end of the Disney World trip. It's time to go. So, this is always the hard part with these webinars, because you just don't have the time you like to have. But I just want to say thank you so much for your expertise, your time. I know you're both very busy. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with your peers throughout the country. And you shared some really good information. So thank both of you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And the one last question that was asked, and I'll answer that. They mentioned, do you have any sites that you recommend? I just would recommend to anyone listening to continue to come back to McGraw Hill's Ed Exchange website, because there's not only going to be webinar information, but there's going to be blogs and other types of information, relevant information that can help educators, in the achievement of their academic outcomes with their students. We have quite a few experts throughout the country, myself being one, who will be sharing everything from technology to motivation to classroom management across the board. So please consider this site as a resource. As far as myself or the panelists, you can always email me at info@coachdspeaks.com for additional information. If you're interested in information about the panelists or the work that I do, my website there is www.coachdspeaks.com. I do programs for students, parents, and staff. And if there's any way, and also we provide consulting projects. If any way we can be of assistance to your schools, please let us know. So we are at the pushing up on the 5 o'clock time limit. Thank you so much for your time, panelists. I hope we'll get a chance to interact again. And once again, thank you for your expertise. And thank you, McGraw-Hill, for this wonderful opportunity to share our knowledge and insight with educators nationwide. Thank you.